Hello everyone, welcome to our recorded discussion in Assessment and Learning 1. And for this video, we will be learning about constructive alignment and authentic assessment, particularly focusing on the methods, tools, and tasks utilized in the classroom assessment and portfolios and scoring rubrics. At the end of this lecture video, you are expected to acquire these different learning outcomes. First, identify steps in constructive alignment. Second, provide examples of various assessment methods used in classroom assessment, and construct a scoring rubric designed to measure authentic assessment. Before we proceed to our concept definition, let us have first this end goal question. How can teachers ensure that assessments match those written learning outcomes? At the end of this lecture video, I hope that we will all be able to answer this question. The framer of the outcome-based education, in the name of William Spivey, defined constructive alignment as creating a learning environment that supports those learning activities which will lead to the achievement of the desired learning outcomes. In particular, by Biggs, this is designing down. Let us look on the different perspective of a curriculum alignment or constructive alignment. In the planning phase, we are expected to craft our learning objectives from the learning competencies provided by the DepEd or from the program to course outcome stipulated in the CHED memorandum orders. After which we can identify our learning outcomes or objectives, we are expected to create those assessment tasks that we believe will help achieve those objectives. Before we can think of teaching and learning activities through the different strategies we can deploy, provided that the presence of differentiated learning. In the implementing phase, however, there is now a deployment of teaching and learning activities before giving the assessment task. So it is still a must that we communicate our teaching and learning activities first. Then we do our activities or our teaching and learning activities. And later, we proceed to giving testing whether they have achieved the assessment. Please do not be confused because there are still non-graded assessments that we can do in the teaching and learning activities. In the constructive alignment implementing phase, what we mean with assessment regime here are those formal assessments that we can give to our learners to assess whether or not they have achieved the learning outcome. However, during the teaching and learning activities, we can deploy different types of non-graded assessment or formative assessment to check the learning progress of our learners. Here, let's look on the mapping perspective of constructive alignment. A good example here is that one of the learning outcomes for this course is that you will be able to apply the different learning taxonomies in constructing aligned learning objectives for your lesson planning. And one of the assessment regime that we have made is the unpacking of learning competencies using or following the SMART principle. This can be both achieved in a formal and summative. Formal that is non-graded during the feedbacking on how we can improve our learning objectives, and summative could be using one of the outputs that is asked for you to create, which is the lesson planning, or it could be during the examination in a written examination form. So this is now mapping the learning outcomes, whether the assessment task really has an alignment with the intended outcome. Now let's proceed to the different methods we can use. So here we have the traditional assessment and authentic assessment. Let it be known that more of authentic assessment will be discussed in our assessment and learning, and that the presence of these two should always be considered, regardless of whatever specialization we have. Because in the DepEd Order 8 series of 2015, or the classroom assessment for basic education learners, there are three components, which are written, performance, and quarterly examination. So, the absence of traditional assessment will not really effectively met our learning outcomes. Or could be, there would be possibility that we will not be able to achieve the learning outcomes. So hence, even if it denotes a traditional assessment, that doesn't mean that we always ask our learners to create or to complete authentic assessment. Here are the example of traditional assessment. In our term, this can just be a pen and paper type of test. So we can deploy a selected response or a constructed response. For selected response, these are multiple choice or matching type, or it could be the alternate response, which is a simple yes or no, or a true or false items. For constructed response, we are asking our student to provide a short answer, write an essay, or solve a problem, still in a pen and paper type of test. Now, here are the examples of authentic assessment. From the word authentic, it deviates the pen and paper type of test. Here, in this assessment, the student is expected to be more engaged in the activity that is provided or that is deployed. For example, in a project base, a product output is expected. Examples are the making of the journals, the graph, the photo essays, and the capstone projects. For process-based, these are mainly performance tasks. An example would be through role-playing, demonstrations of skills, such as, for example, in cooking or in sewing activity, and those are also exploratory tasks in science subject. Now, let us proceed to portfolio as an authentic assessment tool. It is authentic because it must include student participation in selecting contents. It is again a non-pen and paper type of exam. We gave our learners a lot of time to prepare for their portfolio, and that there should be a criteria for selection, the criteria for judging the merit and evidence of self-reflection. That's according to Paulson et al. In 1991 and Navarro et al. In 2013. Hence, portfolio should include the following. First are the artifacts, which are actually the actual work created by the student, such as, for example, their essay outputs, drawings, or reports in paper. Second is the reproductions. These are copies or records of the student work that cannot be physically included in the portfolio. So that's why they put photos of their performance, documentations, and clips of their video recordings. Third is the attestations. Attestations are documents provided by higher authority than our learners. For example, the feedback in writing provided by the teacher, the peer evaluation results could be, or any observation or anecdotal records. They can also put inside the portfolio the productions, such as works that are specifically prepared by the student to demonstrate their learning. Example are the creative outputs, presentations, or a final research output. Now, a portfolio assessment can be deployed in different purposes. First is, it could be an assessment portfolio, a development or growth portfolio, or a showcase or best portfolio. Assessment portfolio are also called evaluation portfolio. We will include artifacts such as the exam results, the scores in quiz for a particular quarter, and sometimes this is a guide for grading and reporting. Developmental or growth portfolio are those work in progress type of portfolio. Examples are their first outputs in writing essays, or could be the first draft they have in their proposal paper up until the last revisions. So remember the word developmental or growth portfolio. there should be an evidence of increased performance. And lastly, we have the showcase or best work. Here, the learner is expected, or the portfolio of the learner is expected to have those best display or best outputs in which rated by very satisfactory to excellent marks. The learner always have the freedom to choose what is included in this type of portfolio. Examples are certificates. It could be also those drawings that were marked as excellent ratings, and so on. Now, to assess or to measure this type of authentic assessment, we need a scoring rubrics. Even in essays, we are expected to create a scoring rubric. A scoring rubric is a coherent set of criteria for students to work that includes description of levels of performance quality. That's according to Brookhart in 2013. To have a bigger picture, let us have this example. So here is the essential part of a rubric. You can see here participation as one of the criteria, and we have the performance level. So the participation can be rated as excellent, good, satisfactory, marginal pass, or fail. And there are different levels of performance. So for descriptors of level of performance, it should be independent from each other. In other words, we do not put a descriptor that is the same with excellent and with good output. Remember that it is a level of. One should be distinguishable than the other level. We define as to what observable traits we can put in the excellent level. Then a different descriptor for a good level, and so on and so forth. Again, the two parts of a scoring rubric is that it should have criteria and the different levels of performance for each criteria. Let us have the different types of rubrics. It could be through analytic rubric and a holistic rubric. What is an analytic rubric? So it articulates different levels of performance for each criterion, so the teacher can assess student performance on each criterion. Example was the one provided earlier, in which there is a different or a distinguishable level of performance in each criterion. However, on the other hand, holistic rubric it does not separate the levels of performance of each criterion. Instead, a holistic rubric assigns a level of performance by assessing the performance across multiple criteria as a whole. Example, we have 5 criteria against the same level of performance. Now, the question would always be when to choose an analytic rubric or when to choose a holistic rubric. So when we use analytic rubric for activities that needs to have a separate or a particular assignment that involve a larger number of criteria, and it could be done in a longer period of time. Example, a dance performance in which they have prepared for quite a while should not be rated just by holistic rubric. If we intend to provide more feedback, specific feedback, we prepare an analytic rubric. On the other hand, we use holistic rubric for activities that needs quick or gross judgment. Example, those are in the classroom activities. We can prepare a holistic rubric for that, for a quick feedbacking or a quick review of student work. But still, it is acceptable that holistic rubric can also be used in different assessment tasks, so long that we can justify why we utilize such type of rubric. Remember that we make our own learning outcomes. Then we formulate the assessment task, after which we plan the teaching and learning activities for the planning perspective. Hence, we should know what type of rubrics to be used in those assessment tasks, and even during the teaching and learning activities we deploy. So to answer again our question, how can we make sure that the assessment is aligned with our learning outcomes? We make sure that we follow the constructive alignment and we utilize different methods of assessment as discussed. In the reference book that we have different examples of rubrics that we can utilize. So in the classroom discussion or in the classroom activity, you will be expected to create a scoring rubric both for analytic and holistic learning. That would be all for this discussion. Thank you.